Alright, YouTube, I got asked by several subscribers to do like movies that I enjoy, and actually my girlfriend suggested I do like Q&A stuff. I don't know how I feel about Q&A in a general sense, but covering, I guess, general topics is okay. So I'm going to talk about some of the movies that I like to watch, because I think some people might be interested in the kind of, material that I actually absorb when I'm not making videos or writing or whatever. First, I have the tendency, I don't know if anyone else does this, but when I'm working or when I'm doing something else that doesn't require me to listen to anything, like I'm on a chat room or just goofing off or whatever, even if I'm not doing something on the computer, I have the tendency to put a movie on. It doesn't really matter what movie as long as it's one that I'm somewhat interested in. And I'll close it out. I'll just be listening to it like it's a radio broadcast or something, and I can actually like see the movie in my mind. I also have the tendency to watch, if I like a movie, if I really like it, I will watch it many, many times. Some of the view counts are approaching the 1,000 mark at this point for certain movies that I've watched many times. I would say mostly I'm into horror, which I think is stereotypically what I would be into. But I also like adventure and action. I like some comedy. I don't like modern comedies. If I'm going to watch comedy, it's going to be old slapstick comedy. I have a great love for Young Frankenstein, which I think is the funniest movie that's ever been made. I think Mel Brooks, working with Gene Wilder, produces great things. I think anything that either of them do is worth watching anyway. But for Young Frankenstein, it really comes together and produces a movie that I find absolutely hilarious. First time I watched it, I was laughing throughout the entire thing, and even now, watching it several hundred times at least, I would say, still when I watch it, I'm just laughing away the entire time, because it's fucking hilarious. That's the best comedy. I like Tim Burton's work. And it doesn't really matter what work it is. His particular style doesn't really matter what it is. But I'm partial to the claymation sort of material. I think his best movie. This might be slightly unpopular because most people like Nightmare Before Christmas. I think that's a great movie, but I like Corpse Bride better. I think Corpse Bride is about about the most romantic movie that I've seen. I consider it more romantic than most dedicated romance movies. Perhaps because I'm into like the goth and the darkness and the sort of blasphemous side of that work. I think it clicks for me. It's a good movie. I like Indiana Jones, the original stuff, not the newer movies. They're good. There's nothing wrong with them, but they pale in comparison to the original work. Raiders of the Lost Ark is good. I like Temple of Doom the best. Some people, when it first came out, hated Temple of Doom. They said, well, the first movie was all pure action, but this one's just trying to gross people out. They had a big problem about the feast scene, where you've got the boiled snake with the eels inside, and you've got people eating bugs and stuff. I thought that was hilarious. I mean, I don't get grossed out by that sort of thing, but I found it funny. And then when they go below into like the dungeons, and there's the bugs everywhere, and she has to reach through to click the lever, and her hand's covered in bugs. I find that absolutely hilarious. I think Indiana Jones never gets old. I've watched those movies hundreds of times. Not so much The Last Crusade. I haven't watched that as much. I think that's a little bit less entertaining than the first two, but it's still a good movie. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. As far as horror goes, like actual horror, I like The Exorcist. I've watched that hundreds of times. Again, I tend to do that. Evil Dead, though, I think is my favorite horror movie. The original Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2 is good. I don't think it was quite as good as the first. I don't like the third in the series, and I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, for which some people will crucify me, but I'm not as much into that with the claymation skeletons and sort of the move towards comedy. The original Evil Dead had some comedy in it, but it was mostly a low-budget cult horror movie. And that's what I want to watch. Also, I like The Blair Witch. And a lot of people hate The Blair Witch, but you've got to realize, I can remember back when it first came out and people thought it was real, and they were absolutely going bananas over it. And so when I finally got to see it, of course, I knew by that point it wasn't real found footage, but it was still interesting. I think there were a couple of jump scenes in it, and the spooky atmosphere was really good, admittedly. I like Blair Witch 2. I haven't watched it hundreds of times, but I think, actually, their purpose was to make a really good sequel. And they failed at it because the original Blair Witch was drummed up using the internet as a marketing tool back when people assumed that it was real. That's why it got popular. But if it had been reversed, if Blair Witch 2 had been released instead, I think that it would have been remembered as a halfway decent horror. Everybody crucified the second Blair Witch movie. Everyone crucified it and hated it. But they were comparing it to the original cult success that itself was ultimately a shitty movie, deliberately made shitty, and they didn't even realize that the second movie is deliberately cultic. It's deliberately low-budget acting, and I think that the actors and actresses in it actually did a good job with a script that might appear fairly weak. I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was better than most of the horror that I've watched. Amityville Horror, either the old or new one. Both of them, to me, are pretty good, and they get lower marks than a lot of the other sort of cult classics in horror. I thought there was nothing wrong with them. Now, here's the most unpopular thing I can possibly say with regards to film. I'll get back to more horror in a minute, because it's my favorite genre, as well as some creepy French movies that I think people would like. I'm going to say something that I'm sure will get on a lot of your nerves. I think that so far, the two Hobbit movies that have been released are superior to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I've watched them more times. I know that a lot of people will not like that, specifically people who are deep into Tolkien material. They will say that no, it's terrible, even Bakshi's version was better. No. The Hobbit movies so far really do it for me. The first one was a little bit slow to start, but you gotta realize there's backstory in The Hobbit too. I've read The Hobbit several times. I think they're doing an excellent job. With the acting is good. The effects are amazing. You look at Smaug the dragon, and the effects are more mind-blowing than the Balrog from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I'm not a huge, Tolkien nerd. I'm not into, dressing as a hobbit or anything like that, but the movies were very enjoyable. But so far, I think that the two Hobbit movies that they've released, and I'm really looking forward to the third, I think they're actually superior, at least to the first. I mean, Return of the Kings obviously was, excellently made. They went all out for it. They went all out for all three Lord of the Rings movies, and there's absolutely nothing that I can say negative about them. The acting was extremely good. The effects were way beyond their time. Everything was basically perfect, other than a few things that they changed from the story, which pissed off the same Tolkien nerds that are pissed off at The Hobbit. But I'm looking on Rotten Tomatoes, and they're getting 70s, and it's my goodness, this is just as epic a trilogy as Lord of the Rings. And if Lord of the Rings hadn't been released first, if they had done The Hobbit first, you'd be pissing your pants in anticipation for Part 3, and you'd be saying it was the best thing you ever saw. And then when they released the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you'd be marking that down somewhat by comparing it to The Hobbit and how epic it was. No, I think all five of the movies that have been released, sort of the Tolkien material, are all very good. I would give them at least high 80s for marks, all of them. But I think that Desolation of Smaug, oh man, it's almost perfect in the way it's presented. Back to horror a little bit. I also like The Descent. The Descent was a very good movie. Extremely bloody, extremely gory, lots of jump scenes, just about everything you could want in a horror movie, and it's made in France. The Descent too. People sort of, again, compared it to the first and said it wasn't as good, but the thing is, it didn't do anything wrong. It was just as gory. It was just as frightening with the jump scenes. The acting was about the same. In fact, one of the people acting there was the same person from the first one as a protagonist. It was a good movie, and seeing it for the first time, yeah, the jump scenes get to you a little bit. The specific scene from the first movie that really creeped everyone out was when that woman is there on the camera, and all of a sudden the night vision turns on for a second, and then there's that weird bat mutant creature right behind her. That really freaked him out. For more French material, Louis Malle's Black Moon, 1973. It's not horror, it's not action, it's not even drama. I don't know exactly how you'd classify this movie. I wouldn't even know it existed. if it hadn't been on demand years and years ago, back when I was in high school. And I said, oh, that looks like a little bit of a creepy movie. It's called Black Moon. That sounds kind of creepy. It sounds like it might be horror, and there wasn't much of a description, so I watched it. And I saw it, and I'm like, this is the most weird thing I've ever seen in my life. Imagine if Alice in Wonderland was a lot darker and had some really, really deep symbolic content to it that went beyond just psychedelia and sort of the allusions to taking drugs and going off into dreamland. Imagine something like that. I can't even categorize it, but Black Moon by Louis Malle, Louis Malle. Excellent movie. Again, no way to classify it whatsoever. It's just completely out there when it comes to movies. For my favorite, though, I think it is Brotherhood of the Wolf. I think Brotherhood of the Wolf is my favorite movie of all time, closely followed by The Ninth Gate. And as I've pointed out before, there is a strange connection whereby both of these movies that I began to enjoy quite heartily are both connected in a weird way with Nicholas Schreck's work, because the same person who did the visual effects for, I believe, both of the movies also worked on You May Be Sitting Next to a Satanist, which I find strange. But both of these movies, I think, are my top for movies. Ninth Gate, a lot of people hate it and sort of think it's boring. I happen to think it's a deliberately slow-paced horror. It deliberately dwells on symbolism, and I actually wrote a piece, I think about a 20-page booklet on The Ninth Gate and its actual occult connections, because I see an archetypal sort of system by which the characters in possession of these books, the Book of the Nine Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows in the movie, they relate very closely with different forms of Satanism and different forms of occultism. You've got the Baroness, who takes it very theistically, but ultimately looks at Satan as a romanticized figure. You've got Balkan, who is also a theistic devil worshipper, but looks at Satan as a means of power. You've got the main protagonist, Corso, who at first is a complete skeptic, turns out to be the one that actually unlocks the gate. And Corso, in my mind, represents the skeptical classical deist, sort of the grand architect, who actually has the final solution to sort of what Satan means. And you've got these other characters and their various desires as well. You've got the inauthentic witch, who uses it to get money. You've got the man who uses Satan to get power. The Baroness, which romanticizes the devil. You've also got, I can't remember his name, the Spaniard, who has one of the copies, who's only in it sort of for the nostalgia, sort of in it to collect arcane material, sort of the archivist, you might think. And these figures represent archetypes that I recognize very easily within the satanic movement. I know I got off on a tangent there. This is about the movie, but I think it's a good movie. Brotherhood of the Wolf, though, is my favorite of all time. French film, high grossing. It did very well. It's more of an underground movie over here, whereas in France it did very, very well, but it's got a little bit of everything. There's literally mixed martial arts in it, with the Native American character, Manny. It takes place in the French pre-revolutionary period. You've got the conspiracy material, sort of a Dan Brown sort of conspiracy going on, and it claims to be the true story of the Beast of Gévaudan. And the Beast of Gévaudan was an actual phenomenon around this time in France. They thought that there was a werewolf stalking the land. Some people thought it was just rabid wolves. Some people said it was a hyena that somehow got imported from one of the French colonies. And it rampaged across the land for years, and it killed many people, attacked livestock, ripped children apart. And people started thinking of it as sort of a biblical plague, and this movie is sort of a conspiratorial take on that. It's got romance, it's got lots of action, it's got the creepy sort of horror feel to it in sort of an ambient way. I would say it's just about the perfect movie. And the thing is, it's not even in English. It's in dubbed English or French with English subtitles. That's the way you find it presented to the English-speaking audience. But it's actually, I think, the best movie that I've ever seen. And there are a lot of other movies. I like classic Disney, which I think most people wouldn't recognize. But, a a lot of people from my generation, because the internet's so prevalent, actually watch Disney cartoons on a regular basis. My favorite Disney movie is Hercules. Hercules fucking is the best. I can remember again when it came out, the scene with the Gorgon, I mean the Hydra, the many-headed Hydra. I can remember when that came out, everyone was like, wow, and they're watching on the old TVs, not like widescreen plasma or anything, and everyone's like gathered around the TV. Even my parents were into it at the time. They're like, wow, that's so many good effects. And now you look at it in comparison to what you've got now, and you're like, it really wasn't that great after all, but it was still a good movie. If I'm gonna watch a Disney movie, it'll be that. If cartoons, Alice in Wonderland, Yellow Submarine, which was the Beatles cartoon. I watched that on LSD, which was a little bit of a life-changing experience when you sort of really get to know what the blue meanies actually stand for, and you're almost crying watching them because you don't want to see anymore. Those were weird times. But yeah, I like a lot of different movies. Jurassic Park, both 1 and 2, not so much the third movie. The one that nobody loves, the infamous, terrible third movie. I really hope that they do better on number 4 that they're planning to release in 2015. The first movie, absolutely epic. I remember when it first came out, everything was Jurassic Park. It was like Pokemon for the 90s. For the early 90s. You couldn't escape Jurassic Park. You heard the music everywhere. You saw the lunch boxes in school. There was no avoiding it. Jurassic Park shirts were flying off the shelves. Everything was dinosaurs. Everyone was convinced as of watching that film, wow, it got to the point where I wanted to train to become a geneticist just so that I could help revive dinosaurs. It was that big a deal at the time. And Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World, which came out several years later, people didn't like it as much. They didn't hate it, but they didn't like it as much. I thought it was just as solid as the first. I thought the idea of dinosaur actually being brought back to the Americas, to the San Diego area, was actually pretty ingenious. Although I will admit, the first movie, the overarching message of the first Jurassic Park movie is don't fuck around with nature because it'll bite back. The second movie took that same symbolism, but it also added an element of sort of pro-hurrah Greenpeace and the environmentalist movement into it. I think that is what pissed some people off. Because the first movie was just as effective at conveying that message without being so in your face about it. The third movie would have been very, very good if it weren't for the fact that the script was so poor that despite the fact that all of the people acting in it were trying their best to do a good job, you've got the same dude playing Alan Grant, you've got several people playing the same roles as the original movie, and several new individuals. None of them are bad actors. They're not shitty actors, but they're being given this script that just doesn't work. It's so jerky. It's so absolutely horrible. Towards the end of the movie, when the little kid talks about, wow, she brought the Navy and the Marines. It's just so cringeworthy. I want to keel over and cry because it's so terrible to have to listen to this poor actor who must have rehearsed this same line several times. And this kid had to have been thinking to himself, I could probably write a better line than this and improvise it. It was that bad. That's why the movie suffered. The movie's premise was great. The acting was solid within the confines of the very poor script. But you could tell that the script writers were not in their right mind at the time. They must have been drinking heavily or something, especially towards the end of the movie. Other than that, it was fine. But I don't know if I would watch it repeatedly like I will the first two Jurassic Parks. I'm trying to think of other movies that I like. There are a lot of them. There are only a few genres I don't like. I don't really like the modern urban sort of drama genre. I don't like drama in a general sense. I like Dan Brown's work too. I liked The Da Vinci Code. Angels and Demons was actually, to me, a lot better than The Da Vinci Code. I think I'm in the minority on that one as well, but they were good movies. But I don't generally like modern drama. I hate romantic comedy. I think that it ruins both the romance and the comedy. That's my take. I know that some people will probably call me a men's rights activist or something for suggesting that they're shitty movies, but The Notebook is a shitty movie. All of these movies are shitty. There's a reason that they get low scores and have low overall viewership, because most people will not watch them. Men will not watch them because, come on, they're so sappy and so over the top. The only sort of romantic themed movie that has sort of a bittersweet but mostly sad ending was The Strange Case of Benjamin Button. That movie was worth watching. There's another movie that I think most people wouldn't think that I would enjoy, and that's Titanic. The only reason I say that, and please don't think that I'm going soft on everyone, because the scenes that I liked were when the ship was sinking and being ripped apart in 3D. Getting to see it with the new 3D glasses was pretty fucking cool. I will admit that. The romantic part, fuck that. I don't give a shit about the romance. It was a little bit touching at the end. You know, it has that nice sentimental symbolism. Mostly, I just wanted to see the ship rip apart. And you're in the theater and you're listening to the ship slowly sink, and these horrible gouging sounds of wood smacking apart and cracking up its length, and everyone screaming and dying and people wailing. It's pretty cool. I would love to watch a war movie in full 3D like that, not the old red and blue glasses that we had to use back during Christmas specials when I was a kid, but the real ones, the new ones, are pretty cool. Trying to think of other movies. I could actually go through my actual folder where I've got the movies, but I'm not going to. Documentaries. Documentaries are something I watch religiously. I love documentaries. I've got, I think, 40 or 50 of them downloaded to my computer at any moment. Mostly things like histories, mysteries. I like the older ones better than the new ones. Like, the best Loch Ness documentary I've ever seen is the one from the 1970s. I hadn't even been born yet. And the reason why is it sticks to its modern documentaries. Other than like a handful of them, anything on the History Channel that's modern is either not a documentary, it's a reality TV, and isn't really history at all. Or it just jumps around over and over and over, commercial after commercial, and everything's flashing around, and you cut to this person, and then this person, and this scene, and everything's flashing on screen at you. It's like, no, that's not how you do an interesting documentary. I know that some people, with their modern inability to focus on anything for more than half a second, may like that. But for those of us who remember, like, Nova documentaries, can you remember all the cool shit we got to see in school? I was watching Magic School Bus and Nova and real History Channel material during the history period and the Hitler period, as opposed to the Her period, which is what it's on right now. I can remember when the History Channel went through its Hitler era. From like 2004 to 2008, everything on the goddamn channel was Hitler. Why do you think that I softened my views on the Holocaust and came out and started questioning the death toll? All I saw when I was in high school every single day was Hitler ranting at me. It was like being at a Hitler Youth rally every single day. And it was enjoyable, you get to see World War II in color and stuff. And before that, it was real history. Now the only good thing on there is like Ancient Aliens. What else do they do? There's nothing else worth watching. It's all reality TV. I'd rather watch the conspiracies and the weird religious sort of quantum stuff. I'd much rather watch that than the bullshit like Pawn Stars or anything like that they have on these channels anymore. Ice Road Truckers, that fucking fishing show where the catfish fishing with their hands or whatever, all this with Duck Dynasty, all this bullshit. That's not history. That's not educational. It's not learning. It's nothing. It's Survivor for the new era. I can remember when Survivor came out, the first one. And everyone was like, oh, it's real. And then everyone found out a few years later what I had been saying since the first time that I saw part of an episode and got bored, which was, this isn't real. They're acting, because otherwise there wouldn't be cameras all over the place. And nobody could believe it until they came out and said that was actually the case. And they had Survivor Tibet, and Survivor Africa, and Survivor, Iceland, and Survivor Siberia under Putinist rule. No, I don't like that sort of stuff. And that's sort of television. But I look at documentaries as standalone movies, and I download them as such. I like Banned from the Bible. I think that was one of the best documentaries that was ever released. That was sort of the end of a period of time for a few years there when a lot of their material was religiously themed. A lot of it dealt with the end times and things like that. I was interested in that stuff. Whereas now, it's all Survivor. To me, none of the stuff on the History Channel, other than reruns of older stuff that they made, is worth watching. I wish that there was a History Channel that just aired stuff from before 2006. Plus some of the conspiracy stuff that they make now that's actually fun to watch, like Ancient Aliens. Because otherwise it's not real history. I don't consider ice road truckers to be legitimate American history. All I see are a bunch of grease monkeys trucking around cargo and complaining about the cold. That's really all I see. Sorry about that. I'm sure that there will be people who don't like my opinion, but that's what I see. But no, I mean, if I'm going to watch movies, if it's not educational material, if I'm watching fiction, it's going to be some good horror, a few of the comedies that have been made, anything with Mel Brooks. Anything Mel Brooks made, I'll watch. He's I think, the genius of modern comedy. Abbott and Costello. Fucking Depression-era movies. They're funnier than a lot of the stuff they release now. Even those are better. Stand-up comedy is alright and so forth. But no, I want to watch a comedy movie that's funny. I'll watch Charlie Chaplin. I'll literally watch silent movies and I'll have a better time than watching most of the comedy that's on any of the networks that run now. Hell, I'll watch The Grinch Who Stole Christmas and the original modeled, horrible-looking, cartoonish figure than I'll watch any of the new Christmas specials. Around Christmas, I will watch cartoons. Year Without a Santa Claus is one of my favorite movies. It's great. I don't give a shit if it refers to, a Christian holiday. It's fucking Santa Claus. Get a life. I don't have to be a Christian to enjoy Santa Claus. Santa Claus was a crazy pagan who was snorting cocaine and going up the chimney. Why do you think he puts his finger next to his nose? I like all that stuff. I like lots of movies. This video is going on half an hour now. I'm really bored at the moment. I was playing Victoria 2 and got tired of constantly defeating the French. I'm playing as the German Empire right now. I'm moving towards a fascist regime, thinking about genocide at the moment, and I already control Israel, so people should be worried that 90% of the population is German right now in the Middle East because I took so much land. But yeah, that's a little bit of my thought on movies. I know it's turned into a rant, but don't sue me. That's about all. Peace out.